The night sky burned like a sea of fire when the small human ship tore through the clouds of an unknown world. Inside, alarms screamed and red lights flashed across the cabin. The ship's pilot, a young engineer named Rin, struggled to control the spinning craft. He had been traveling with a team of explorers, searching for planets that could support human life. But an unseen storm of magnetic energy had struck the ship and scattered its systems into chaos. He pulled the emergency lever, sealing the cockpit from the rest of the ship. The hull was cracking and he knew what came next. The computer voice echoed calmly, "Escape pod ready. Launch recommended." Rin took a deep breath. His heart raced, but his mind stayed sharp. He pressed the release button, and the small pod ejected from the doomed vessel, dropping through a storm of light and flame. The crash was loud but mercifully short. The pod hit the ground in a dense forest, sliding through tall ferns and soft earth before coming to rest beside a stream. Everything went still. The stars shone faintly through the canopy above. Rin unbuckled his harness and opened the hatch. Cold air rushed in, carrying a scent of moss and rain. He stepped out, trembling slightly but alive. His head hurt and his uniform was torn, yet he felt thankful that the pod had protected him. Around him stood trees wider than any he had ever seen, their branches high like towers. The world was green and quiet, filled with strange lights from insects that floated in the air like tiny lanterns. Rin checked his scanner. No signal from his team. His ship was gone and the communication link was dead. The planet's magnetic field was too strong for long-range signals. He was alone, but Rin had been trained for survival. He opened a small compartment in the pod and took out supplies. A small energy cell, a water filter, dried food, and a toolkit. The pod's emergency beacon still worked, though it could only send a low-power signal. He activated it, hoping that one day a rescue ship might find it. For now, he needed to explore. The forest was silent except for the wind and the soft rush of water nearby. Rin followed the stream, marking trees with a small laser cutter so he could find his way back. The air felt heavier here, and gravity seemed slightly stronger than Earth's. He moved slowly but carefully. Hours passed as he gathered information with his handheld scanner. He discovered that the air was rich in oxygen, the soil fertile, and the plants edible after filtration. The place was habitable. But what worried him was the size of everything. The plants, the flowers, even the stones seemed oversized. It was as if this world had grown for beings much larger than humans. As the sun rose, the forest glowed with warm gold. The trees reached far above the mist, their leaves shimmering. Rin found a small clearing beside a pool of water. He set up a temporary camp there, built a small shelter from the remains of his pod, and started a signal flare for visibility. He ate a small meal and wrote in his log. Day 1, crash survived. Planet stable. Life signs unknown. Will continue to explore. He leaned back, staring at the endless sky. Despite the danger, a quiet excitement filled him. Humanity had always looked to the stars, and now he was living on one. But his peace did not last long. That afternoon, the ground trembled. It began as a faint vibration, then grew into a deep rhythmic pulse. Rin froze. It was too regular to be natural. He shut off his small fire and crouched behind a fallen log. The sound grew louder, like the thump of enormous footsteps. Birds fled from the treetops. Then he saw it. At the edge of the forest, a shape moved, tall as a mountain, walking slowly through the mist. It was a woman or something very close to human, but towering far above the trees. Her hair was long and pale, her skin faintly bronze from the sun. She carried a spear larger than Rin's entire pod. Rin's breath caught. He could hardly believe his eyes. He had read stories of giants, but to see one in real life made his heart pound. He stayed perfectly still, hoping not to be seen. The giant woman bent down beside the stream, filling a clay pot with water. When she looked around, her eyes scanned the trees. For a moment, they passed over the place where Rin hid. He held his breath. Then she stood and walked away, her steps shaking the ground like distant thunder. Rin waited for several minutes after she left before moving again. His hands trembled slightly as he activated his recorder. First contact confirmed. Species appears humanoid but enormous. Peaceful behavior so far. Must observe more. He knew he could not survive alone forever. If these beings controlled the land, he would need to understand them. For the next few days, Rin followed their tracks from a safe distance. He saw their village from a hilltop. A vast settlement made of wood and stone, each house tall enough to fit inside a human skyscraper. Smoke from cooking fires drifted into the sky. He saw children of the giants playing beside a river, their laughter echoing like distant bells. They lived in harmony with nature, using the land carefully. The sight amazed him. Despite their size, they were graceful and calm. Rin spent his nights near the forest's edge, repairing his equipment and writing notes. He built a small drone using scraps from his pod, programming it to record aerial views of the village. The images showed large farming fields and giant animals that resembled deer. He began to feel a strange mix of fear and admiration. The giants were powerful but peaceful. If he could communicate with them, perhaps they could help him survive until rescue came. But approaching them was risky. One wrong move could cause panic. He needed a plan. The opportunity came sooner than he expected. One morning, Rin heard a loud cry from the forest. He rushed toward the sound and found a giant child trapped in a pit. The ground had collapsed under her, leaving her ankles stuck between rocks. She was crying softly, calling for help. No one else was near. Rin hesitated. The child was enormous. Her hand alone was larger than his body, but he could see her pain. He knew he had to try. He climbed down into the pit and looked at the trapped foot. The rocks had pinned her ankle, but with leverage they could be moved. Rin pulled a metal rod from his pack and wedged it under the largest stone. Using his full weight, he pressed down. The rock shifted slightly, enough for the girl to pull her leg free. She gasped and looked down at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. Rin stepped back, breathing hard. "It's okay. You're free," he said, though he knew she might not understand his words. The girl tilted her head, studying him curiously. Then she smiled, a gentle, grateful smile that filled the pit with warmth. She reached down and carefully lifted him in her hand, holding him like a bird. Rin stayed calm, trusting her. She carried him out of the pit and set him on the grass. Then she spoke, her voice deep and soft like thunder rolling over the hills. Rin could not understand her language, but he recognized the tone, kindness and wonder. When she placed her hand on her chest and said a word that sounded like Loma, Rin realized it was her name. He pointed to himself and said, "Rin." She repeated it slowly, smiling again. Before long, other giants arrived, running toward the sound of her call. They stopped in shock when they saw Rin. Loma spoke quickly, pointing to her ankle and then to him. The giants murmured among themselves. Rin stood still, his heart racing. He could not tell if they were angry or amazed. One of the older giants, a tall woman wearing a necklace of carved stones, stepped forward. Her eyes were sharp but not cruel. She looked at Rin for a long time, then nodded slowly. The giants seemed to decide something. The woman gestured for Rin to follow. He hesitated, then nodded. It was time to take a chance. They walked together through the forest, the giants moving slowly so Rin could keep up. The sun was high when they reached the village. The settlement was breathtaking. Giant wooden houses stood in rows with banners fluttering in the wind. Fields of grain waved golden in the sunlight. Dozens of giants stopped their work to watch the small human walk through their streets. Some looked fearful, others curious. At the center of the village stood a large stone platform surrounded by carvings. The tall woman who led the group stepped onto it and spoke in a commanding voice. Rin guessed she was their leader. The others listened in silence. When she finished, she turned toward him. Rin bowed slightly, hoping the gesture would show respect. The leader studied him, then raised her hand and said something. The crowd murmured again. Loma came forward, holding Rin's small pack and handing it to the leader. The woman opened it, examining the tools inside. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw the water filter. Rin took it back gently and demonstrated how it worked, purifying muddy water into clear drops. The giants gasped in surprise. Murmurs spread through the crowd. The leader looked thoughtful, then gave a soft smile. She said something that Rin could not understand, but her tone was warm. Then she pointed to the sky, miming a falling motion, and touched her chest. Rin understood. She knew he had fallen from the stars. The giant stepped back respectfully, leaving space around him. Rin felt both small and powerful at once. A tiny creature from another world, standing before beings who could crush him but chose instead to listen. That night, the tribe gave him a place to rest near their great hall. Loma brought him food, simple roots and fruits, and watched him eat with fascination. The leader, whose name he learned was Myera, visited him briefly. She spoke a few words, then pointed to the sky again, smiling. Rin nodded. He didn't know her language yet, but he understood her meaning. Morning sunlight spilled over the valley as Rin woke to the sound of distant voices. The village of the giants was alive with movement. Huge shadows passed outside his small shelter as the tribe began their daily work. He stepped out, blinking at the brightness, feeling both tiny and amazed. The giants moved with a slow, graceful rhythm. Some carried bundles of grain larger than Rin's body. Others tended to giant animals grazing near the river. The air smelled of wood smoke and wildflowers. Rin had never seen such a balance between strength and peace. He noticed Loma, the young giant girl he had helped, waving from across the field. Her smile was warm and friendly. She carried a wooden bowl the size of a human table filled with fruit. When she placed it beside him, Rin climbed up carefully, choosing a few pieces that were small enough for him to eat. The fruit was sweet and its taste reminded him of home. "Thank you." "Loma," he said with a grateful nod. She smiled again and pointed toward the center of the village, where the leader Myera stood near the great stone platform. The crowd of giants had gathered around her. Loma made a gesture for Rin to follow. Rin adjusted the straps of his small pack and walked toward them. Each step made his heart beat faster. He still did not know how the tribe truly saw him. Was he a guest, a curiosity, or a problem they did not yet understand? As he reached the platform, Myera raised her hand. The crowd fell silent. She looked down at Rin and spoke in her deep, calm voice. Her words rolled through the air like distant drums. Rin could not understand, but her tone was clear and steady. When she finished, an older man among the giants stepped forward, carrying a clay jar filled with cloudy water. He poured some into a bowl and set it beside Rin. Then he looked at Myera and spoke a few words that sounded uncertain. Rin understood what this was. They wanted to test him. The water was from the river, mixed with sand and soil. The giants had been drinking from it for years, but it often made them sick. When Rin had shown them his water filter the night before, they must have wondered if his tool could truly purify it. He took out the filter from his pack and placed it beside the bowl. The crowd leaned closer. Even Myera's expression changed from calm to curiosity. Rin began his work carefully. He attached the small pump to the side of the bowl, dropped the intake tube into the muddy water, and turned the handle. The filter hummed softly as it pulled the water through its metal coils. Slowly, clear drops began to fall into a cup he had made from one of the giant's fruit shells. The giants gasped. Their eyes widened in disbelief as Rin held up the cup, showing the clean, sparkling water. Then he took a sip himself to prove it was safe. Myera stepped closer and looked at the cup. Rin offered it to her. She hesitated for a moment, then gently lifted the small cup between her fingers and tasted it. Her expression softened. She spoke a few words to the crowd. The giants began to murmur with excitement. Rin smiled. He did not need to understand the language to know that he had passed their test. Myera placed a hand over her chest and said something that sounded like respect. Then she pointed toward the northern hills where the soil looked dry and cracked. She gestured as if asking for his help again. Rin nodded eagerly. Helping them meant earning trust, and trust meant survival. Over the next few days, Rin studied the land. The northern fields were suffering from drought. The river did not reach that far, and the tribe's large clay canals were cracked. The giants carried water in huge jars, but it was slow and exhausting work. Rin realized he could help by building a simple pump system using wind power. He spent long hours gathering materials from his broken escape pod. With Loma's help, he collected metal scraps, wires, and parts of the rotor. The giants watched with fascination as he worked. Some even brought him tools of their own, giant-sized hammers and stone chisels, which he used in clever ways. One evening, as the sun turned the sky orange, Rin stood beside Myera and pointed to a rough sketch he had drawn in the dirt. It showed a tall pole with wide wooden blades spinning in the wind, connected to a pump that would move water uphill. Myera listened carefully, nodding as she began to understand. The next day, half the village gathered to help him. The giants lifted the heavy wooden poles with ease, planting them deep into the ground. Rin climbed onto the structure using ropes, adjusting the blades and checking the balance. Every movement had to be precise. The giants followed his signals closely. By sunset, the first windmill stood tall in the golden light. Rin wiped the sweat from his forehead and stepped back. The wind picked up slowly, turning the blades with a soft creak. The pump began to work and water started to flow through the canal into the dry field. The giant stared in silence for a moment. Then, as the water filled the cracked earth, cheers erupted across the field. Loma clapped her hands, laughing with joy. Mara smiled widely, her eyes glowing with pride. Rin felt a wave of relief and happiness. He had done it. He had brought life back to the field. That night, the tribe held a celebration. They lit large fires around the village and the sound of drums echoed through the valley. The giants sang songs that filled the air like the heartbeat of the world. Rin sat near the fire, watching the dance of light and shadow across their faces. Loma brought him a carved cup filled with a warm drink made from local fruit. He took a sip and smiled. It tasted sweet and rich. The giants laughed as they watched him try to lift a piece of their bread that was nearly as big as his head. Mara approached him, her steps slow and steady. She sat down on the ground beside him, lowering herself so their eyes were almost level. She spoke softly, her voice deep but kind. Rin did not understand the words, yet he understood the meaning. She was thanking him. He pointed to the sky and then to the tribe, saying, "Together." Mara seemed to understand. She nodded and repeated the word slowly. Together. From that day on, Rin became a part of their daily life. The giants respected him not as a pet or a small curiosity, but as a friend and helper. They built a small workshop for him near the river made of wood and stone. Loma often visited, bringing him food and watching as he repaired tools or designed new ones. One morning, a group of hunters returned with worry on their faces. They spoke urgently to Mara. Rin watched from a distance, curious. Soon after, Mara called for him and gestured for him to follow. They walked beyond the village to the edge of the forest, where the ground was cracked and the air smelled faintly of smoke. Mara pointed toward the horizon where a thin column of dark mist rose into the sky. Rin frowned. It was not natural. His scanner confirmed his fear. It was a sign of underground gas leaks spreading through the soil. If the gas reached the fields, it could poison the plants in the river. Rin realized that he had to act quickly. He explained with hand gestures and drawings in the dirt. The giants watched carefully, understanding little by little. They began to dig deep channels to redirect the gas, while Rin used metal pieces from his pod to create simple vents that released pressure safely. The work was long and exhausting. Rin's hands were sore and the heat pressed down on him, but the giants worked tirelessly beside him. Loma carried heavy rocks to block the dangerous vents while others cleared debris from the riverbanks. By evening, the gas had stopped spreading. Rin tested the air again. It was safe. Mayara looked at him with gratitude and touched her chest, a gesture of deep respect in their culture. Rin smiled back, feeling proud. That night, as the tribe rested, Mara invited Rin to sit near her fire. She took out a piece of carved wood and began drawing symbols on the ground. She pointed to herself and said, "Myra." Then she pointed to the carving of a mountain. Rin realized the symbol meant leader. He nodded and pointed to himself, saying, "Rin." He drew a small star beside his name. Mayra smiled and repeated it softly, "Rin star." Over time, Rin began learning their words. Loma often helped him, teaching him simple phrases and laughing whenever he mispronounced them. He learned that their tribe called themselves the Veyri, and their valley was named Tarren Vale. They believed the stars were the eyes of their ancestors, watching over them. When Rin told them through gestures that he had come from the stars, the tribe saw him not as an intruder but as a messenger of fate. As weeks turned into months, Rin's presence changed the tribe in many small ways. He taught them new methods for filtering water, preserving food, and building stronger tools. In return, they taught him their language, their songs, and their ways of life. Sometimes, when the night grew quiet, Rin would look up at the stars and wonder if his people were still searching for him. But the thought no longer brought only sadness. He had found something new here, a family that had accepted him even though he was different. One evening, Mayara came to him again. She spoke of something important. Through her gestures, Rin understood that the valley would soon face another challenge. The weather was changing. Dark clouds were forming over the mountains and cold winds began to blow. A great storm was coming. Rin looked toward the horizon where lightning flickered faintly among the peaks. He knew the storm could destroy everything they had built if they were not prepared. He turned to Myra, his face calm but determined. "We will face it," he said softly. She might not understand the words, but she understood his voice. Myra nodded, her eyes filled with trust. For the first time since his arrival, Rin felt not like. The morning air was clear in Terran Vale. The wind moved softly through the tall grass, and the river shone like silver. The tribe of the Veari worked in peace, repairing the fields and gathering food for the coming season. Rin stood on a hill watching the horizon. His small scanner rested in his hand, and the green light on it still blinked. For several nights he had watched the sky. He knew something was coming. The signal from the ancient machine beneath the mountain had reached space, and somewhere far away it had been heard. At first he had felt only joy, but now as the sound of thunder rolled faintly across the clouds, his heart felt heavy. He had lived among the giants for many months. He had eaten with them, worked beside them, and learned their language. They were no longer strange to him. They were his people now. The idea of leaving them made his chest tighten with sadness. Myra approached the hill quietly. Her long shadow stretched across the grass as she came to stand beside him. She looked up at the same sky, her deep voice calm but thoughtful. "They come for you," she said. Rin nodded slowly. "Yes, I think my people heard the signal." Myra studied his face for a moment. "And will you go with them?" Rin looked down at the valley. He saw the children playing by the river, the windmill turning in the breeze, and the giant homes built with both stone and metal. He remembered how hard they had all worked to make this place safe again. "I do not know," he said softly. "I want to see my world again, but I also want to stay. This place is part of me now." Myra placed a hand on his shoulder. "Whatever you choose, you will not walk alone. The Veari stand with you." That afternoon, the sound in the sky grew louder. The clouds began to move in wide circles, and the wind carried a strange hum. The giants gathered in the open field, looking upward in awe. Rin's scanner showed strong readings of energy above them. A few minutes later, a bright light appeared in the clouds. The light grew larger and clearer until it became the shape of a ship. It was smaller than the great vessels Rin had known, but still large enough to cast a long shadow across the valley. Its silver surface shone under the sun, and blue lights glowed along its sides. The tribe stepped back in wonder as the ship descended slowly, stirring the grass with its engines. When it landed near the riverbank, the air became still again. The ramp lowered, and 3 figures stepped out. They were humans dressed in white suits, helmets shining in the sunlight. One of them raised a hand in greeting. "Survivor of the Explorer 9, a voice said through a speaker. "We received your signal. We are here to bring you home." Rin felt his heart race. The words sounded strange after so many months of hearing only the giant language. He walked forward carefully, stopping a few meters away from the newcomers. "I am Rin," he said. "You came from the fleet?" The leader nodded. "Yes, you were reported lost over a year ago. We tracked the signal from this valley. We did not expect to find life here." The humans looked past him and saw the Veari standing in the distance. The giants watched quietly, their tall figures like living mountains. The newcomers stepped back in shock. "Are those alive?" one of them whispered. Rin smiled faintly. "Yes, they are my friends. They helped me survive." The leader hesitated. "We must study them. This could be an important discovery." Rin's smile faded. He knew that tone. It was the voice of science, not respect. He looked up at Myra, who stood with calm dignity at the edge of the field. Her gaze was steady, but he could see the question in her eyes. He turned back to the humans. "They are not subjects to study. They are people. They saved me when I had nothing. You must treat them with honor." The humans exchanged uncertain glances. "Of course," the leader said quickly. "But we must report this to the command. The council will want to know." Rin looked at the ship. It represented everything he had once dreamed of, a return to the stars, safety, and familiarity. But he also saw the faces of the Veari, who had given him food, shelter, and trust. He took a deep breath. "Before I decide, I want to show you something." He led them to the mountain path. The Veari followed silently, their steps heavy but careful. When they reached the stone doorway, Rin explained what lay beneath. The humans listened closely as he described the ancient machine and how he had repaired it with the tribe's help. When they entered the chamber, the visitors gasped at the sight of the glowing crystals and the great sphere at the center. The energy readings on their devices were high, far beyond anything they had seen on similar worlds. "This is incredible," one of them said. "It's a living power source. Maybe even a terraforming core," Rin nodded. "It keeps the valley alive. It was broken once, but now it is whole again. We fixed it together." The leader looked impressed. "You did this with their help?" "Yes," Rin said firmly. "They are intelligent and kind. They understand the land better than we do." For a long moment, the humans stood quietly. The hum of the ancient core filled the air like a heartbeat. When they stepped outside again, the sky had turned golden. The sun was setting, painting the valley in soft light. The leader removed his helmet and looked at Rin seriously. "You have a choice," he said. "You can return with us. You will have food, safety, and a place among your people again, or you can stay here with them. But if you stay, we may not come back for a long time. This planet is far from the main routes." Rin looked up at the sky, then down at his hands. He had dreamed of this moment for months, yet now that it was here, it felt strange and heavy. He turned to Myra. She watched him silently, her expression calm but sad. Loma stood beside her, holding a basket of fruit she had gathered that morning. The children of the tribe peeked from behind her legs, curious and bright-eyed. Rin walked toward them. He felt the grass beneath his boots, the warm air on his face, the heartbeat of the valley beneath his feet. He realized that this world had changed him. He looked at Myra. "You gave me life when I had nothing. You taught me strength and peace." "I will never forget that," Myra smiled faintly. "And you gave us hope. You healed our world." Rin turned back to the leader. "Tell the fleet what you found here. Tell them that the Veyari are friends, not subjects. Tell them that this world must remain free." The leader hesitated. "And you?" Rin smiled. "I will stay." There was silence. The humans looked at one another, unsure of how to respond. Finally, the leader nodded. "As you wish. We will respect your choice." They left him a small communication device and supplies before boarding the ship again. The engines roared softly as the vessel lifted off the ground. The giants watched as it rose higher and higher until it became a bright star against the darkening sky. Rin stood beside Myra, watching the light fade. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The wind moved gently across the valley, carrying the scent of blooming flowers. At last, Myra said, "The sky returns, but you remain." Rin nodded. "The stars will always be part of me, but this land is my heart now." In the days that followed, the tribe continued to grow and learn. Rin taught them new ways to build and store food. The Veyari taught him stories of the earth and sky. Together, they became more than two peoples. They became one. Sometimes at night, Rin would sit by the river and look up at the stars. He wondered if the fleet had truly understood his message. Perhaps they had. Perhaps they would come again one day, not as explorers, but as friends. He often thought of the words carved into the ancient chamber beneath the mountain. Seed of life, guardian of worlds. He now understood them. The machine was not only a protector of the land. It was a reminder that life could endure anywhere, even among strangers, as long as there was kindness and courage. Years passed, and the valley flourished. The river never dried again. The crops grew strong, and the children of the Veyari learned to speak both their language and the human tongue. They often gathered around Rin to hear stories of the stars and the worlds beyond. He would tell them about the ships that sailed through space, the great cities that floated among the clouds, and the dream of unity between all beings. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Rin stood on the same hill where he had once watched the rescue ship land. The windmill turned slowly in the distance, its blades catching the golden light. Myra, now older but still strong, joined him there. She looked at him with quiet pride. "You stayed," she said. Rin smiled. "I stayed because I found something worth more than the stars." Myra nodded. "You gave us the gift of your heart. That is greater than any treasure." The two of them stood in silence, watching the valley glow under the evening light. The air was peaceful, filled with the soft sound of life, the sound of a world reborn. As darkness fell, the first stars appeared above. Rin looked at them and whispered a small promise to himself. "No matter where I am, I will protect this world. It is home." Far above, unseen by any eye, a faint signal pulsed through the sky, a message from the heart of the world. It carried across the stars, simple and clear. It said that life had endured, that friendship had grown, and that one human, lost among giants, had found a home where the sky and the earth met as one. The air in Terran Vale had turned calm again. Days passed peacefully after the great storm. The trees were green, the river was full, and the tribe of the Veyari sang while they worked. The sound of laughter filled the valley. Rin walked through the fields with a quiet smile, feeling proud of what they had built together. The windmill spun gently, its blades repaired and stronger than before. The irrigation channels he had designed now carried water across the land, feeding the crops. The tribe no longer feared drought or fire. For the first time, Rin felt like he belonged, but in the back of his mind he could not forget what he had seen near the mountain. The smooth stone, the strange markings, the hum of energy his scanner had detected. All of it told him that something ancient slept beneath the ground. Something not made by nature. Each morning he found himself looking toward the mountain peaks. The more he thought about it, the stronger his curiosity grew. One day, as he was checking the river pumps, Loma came running from the direction of the mountain. Her eyes were wide with excitement. She spoke quickly, her hands moving in gestures Rin had come to understand. She had found something. Rin followed her along the path through the forest. The ground rose slowly and the trees became thicker and older. When they reached the base of the mountain, Loma pointed ahead. A section of the hillside had collapsed after the storm, revealing a large stone doorway buried beneath the roots of an ancient tree. Rin stepped closer. His scanner hummed again, detecting metal beneath the stone. The doorway was covered in carvings that looked like stars and waves. In the center, a circle glowed faintly when he touched it. "This is no natural cave," Rin said softly. He turned to Loma and gestured that they should tell Maera. She nodded and ran back toward the village. By evening, Maera and several elders arrived. They stood before the doorway, their faces filled with both wonder and worry. Maera spoke slowly, explaining to Rin that their old stories spoke of a heart of the world buried under the mountain, a gift from the ancestors that no one was meant to disturb. Rin listened carefully. He respected their beliefs, but he also knew that this discovery could be important. Perhaps the structure was a piece of technology left by an older civilization. Maybe it even held a way for him to contact the stars again. Maera saw the curiosity in his eyes and sighed. After a long silence, she placed her hand on his shoulder and said one word he understood clearly: "Careful." The next morning, Rin returned with his tools. Maera allowed him to study the site, but only with great caution. A group of giants stood nearby, ready to help if needed. Loma watched closely, fascinated by every move he made. Rin brushed away the dirt from the carvings and found a small panel hidden beneath a layer of stone. It looked like a control pad. When he pressed one of the symbols, a faint vibration moved through the ground. The circle in the center of the doorway began to glow brighter. Everyone stepped back as the stone slowly shifted. The doorway opened with a deep sound that echoed through the valley. A tunnel appeared inside, wide enough even for the giants to enter. Cool air rushed out, carrying the scent of metal and dust. Maera looked uneasy. She spoke to Rin, reminding him that they should not anger whatever spirit might sleep inside. Rin nodded and promised to be respectful. He turned on his small lamp and stepped into the tunnel. Loma followed carefully, her huge steps quiet on the stone floor. The walls were smooth and covered with glowing lines that pulsed softly like living veins. Rin scanned them with his device and realized they carried power, ancient circuits still alive after countless years. As they walked deeper, they entered a large chamber filled with crystal-like pillars. The light from them painted the air in blue and silver. In the center stood a tall structure shaped like a sphere. It was half buried, but Rin could see markings that looked like writing. He touched the surface gently. The sphere came to life with a low hum. A beam of light rose from it and projected a series of symbols into the air. Rin stared in awe. They were not giant runes nor any human language he knew, but his device began to translate the energy patterns. The message was short and simple. "Seed of life, guardian of worlds." Rin frowned in thought. Could this be a machine that once protected this planet? Was it still active? He turned to Maera and Loma, explaining as best as he could with gestures that this place was not a tomb, but something that helped the world grow. Maera listened carefully, her eyes softening as she began to understand. Suddenly, the light changed. The sphere pulsed faster, and one of the crystal pillars cracked slightly. A deep sound echoed through the tunnel, making the giant step back in alarm. Rin's scanner showed that the energy inside the sphere was unstable. Perhaps the storm had awakened it after centuries of sleep. If it became too active, it could harm the valley above. He looked at Mara. "I need to fix it," he said, pointing to the sphere and then to the ground. "If it breaks, danger." Mara hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Rin fix. Fayari help." Rin began to work quickly. He climbed the base of the sphere using ropes to reach the cracks. Inside, he could see the glow of crystals that powered the structure. They were leaking light, their energy uneven. He used his tools to adjust the flow, reconnecting wires and sealing gaps with melted resin from his toolkit. Loma handed him pieces of strong crystal she found nearby. Following his instructions carefully, the giants worked with surprising gentleness, aware of how delicate the ancient machine was. Hours passed as Rin worked. His arms ached and sweat ran down his face, but he did not stop. Slowly, the sphere's glow steadied and the vibrations calmed. When he connected the final wire, the light spread evenly across the walls. The machine let out a low, peaceful hum, like the sound of wind over water. The air grew warm and soft. Rin climbed down, breathing hard but smiling. "It's safe now," he said. Mayra touched one of the glowing walls and looked amazed. The light reflected in her eyes like tiny stars. She spoke to the elders, telling them that the heart of the mountain was healed. The tribe cheered softly, their deep voices echoing through the tunnels. Before leaving, Rin placed his hand on the sphere one last time. A faint shimmer of light ran across it, and for a moment, he thought he heard a voice, not words, but a calm, distant sound like a memory. When they stepped out into the sunlight, the entire valley seemed brighter. The wind carried a new warmth. Flowers that had not bloomed in years opened along the hillside. It was as if the mountain had begun to breathe again. The tribe called it a miracle. They built stone markers near the entrance to honor the heart of the world. Rin was named Healer of the Mountain. That night the celebration was quiet, but full of gratitude. The giants lit lanterns along the river, letting them float downstream like stars returning to the sky. Rin watched them drift away, thinking of his old home among the real stars. Later, Mayra sat beside him near the fire. She spoke softly in her deep voice. Rin had learned enough of their language to understand her words. "You came from far above, but you bring life, not fire. Thevayari, thank you." Rin looked up at her and smiled. "You gave me a home. We help each other." Mayra nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps the stars sent you for a reason." Over the next few weeks, the tribe continued to learn from the discovery. Rin studied the mountain's energy patterns and realized that the machine beneath it was connected to the planet's natural balance. It helped control rain, sunlight, and growth. The storms that had nearly destroyed them might have been caused by its long sleep. By repairing it, he had restored harmony to the valley. But his repairs also awakened another function of the ancient structure, a faint signal that reached far into the sky. Rin noticed it one night while checking his scanner. A small green light blinked on his device, showing an outgoing transmission. His heart skipped a beat. It was a message, possibly reaching space. Maybe someone would hear it. He showed the reading to Mayra and Loma. They did not understand the meaning, but they saw the hope in his eyes. Mayra placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "If your sky people come, we welcome them. You are one of us now." Rin looked at the blinking light and felt a mix of joy and worry. He had dreamed of rescue for months, but now that the signal was sent, he realized he was no longer sure if he wanted to leave. The valley was his home. The tribe was his family. Days later, a new sound echoed in the distance, a faint rumble high above the clouds. The giants looked up in confusion. Rin's scanner confirmed it. Something was approaching from space. He turned toward Mayra, his heart racing. "My people," he whispered. But in his chest he also felt a quiet fear. The world of the giants was peaceful, and he knew that not all humans understood peace the same way. The light of the mountain pulsed softly, as if aware of what was coming. Rin looked toward the sky, then toward the tribe who had trusted and accepted him. Whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain. He would protect Terran Vale and the Vayari, even if it meant standing between two worlds. As night fell, the stars shone brighter than ever, reflecting in the river like 1,000 eyes watching over them. The wind whispered across the valley, carrying the promise of change. And beneath the mountain, the heart of the world continued to hum, waiting for the meeting of the sky and the earth. The sky had changed. For days the clouds gathered over the mountains like heavy gray blankets. The wind blew stronger each morning, carrying the scent of rain and something sharper. The smell of fear that hung in the air before a great storm. Rin stood on a hill beside Mara, watching the sky darken. The valley below looked peaceful, but he could see the signs of danger. The trees bent with the wind and the river swelled higher each day. The air was full of static energy that made his hair stand on end. Mara spoke quietly in her deep voice, pointing toward the mountains. Rin could understand a few words now. She said storm, fire, and mountain wind. He nodded, understanding what she meant. The storm would not bring only rain and crew, it would bring lightning. In a valley full of dry trees and wooden homes, lightning could mean disaster. Rin knew they had to prepare. He gathered his tools and began to work with the tribe. Using his small size to his advantage, he ran across the village, checking every house, every water path, and every tool. He showed the giants how to build water trenches around the wooden homes to stop fire from spreading. The giants followed his instructions carefully. They had learned to trust his ideas. Loma helped him carry large ropes made of vines, while others gathered clay and sand to make barriers. When night came, the wind grew cold. Rin climbed to the top of his windmill to check the blades. The wind pushed hard against him, and he had to cling tightly to the ropes. From up high, he could see the valley lights flickering below like stars on the ground. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. He climbed down and returned to his shelter. Loma waited for him, holding a large woven blanket to shield him from the wind. She said something in her gentle voice that he could not fully understand, but felt like a warning to be careful. Rin smiled and nodded. The next morning, thunder rolled across the valley. The storm had arrived. The first rain fell slowly, tapping against the roofs. Then, in a flash of white light, a bolt of lightning struck one of the far trees. The sound was like the sky breaking apart. The dry wood burst into flame. The giants shouted in alarm. The fire spread quickly through the tall grass and fallen leaves. The wind carried sparks toward the outer houses. Rin ran toward Mara, shouting and waving his arms. "The fire will spread. We must make a line," he said, using his hands to show what he meant. Mara understood. She raised her arm and gave orders to the tribe. The giants moved with speed and strength. They formed a wide circle between the fire and the village, using shovels the size of trees to clear the ground. Rin ran along the line, directing them where to dig and where to pour water. His small body moved like an ant among giants, but his voice carried with confidence. Loma helped by filling huge clay pots with water from the river. She carried them 2 at a time, her long hair soaked by rain. Rin worked beside her, using his small filter to fill smaller containers quickly for other helpers. The fire roared louder, but the rain began to fall harder, slowing its advance. Still, the danger was far from over. Another lightning bolt struck a nearby hill, setting a group of dry trees ablaze. Mara shouted something urgent and pointed toward the hill. Rin saw the flames climbing fast. He realized the wind was shifting. The fire would soon reach the storage huts where the tribe kept their food and tools. If they lost those, they might not survive the coming season. Rin took a deep breath and ran toward the hill. The mud slipped under his feet and the rain stung his eyes, but he kept going. Loma saw him and followed, calling his name. Together they reached the burning slope. The heat was intense, but Rin stayed focused. He pointed toward a ditch nearby and shouted, "Water here! Flood the ground!" Loma understood his gestures and smashed one of the clay pots against a rock, letting the water spill down the slope. The others followed her lead, bringing more water until the fire began to slow. Rin used his toolkit to connect a small pipe to the windmill pump. He redirected the water flow toward the hill. The pump whirred and began to spray a steady stream. The giants cheered as the flames weakened and finally died out. By nightfall, the storm calmed. The rain continued to fall softly, washing the smoke from the air. The ground was wet, and the valley smelled of burned wood and fresh earth. The tribe was exhausted but safe. Rin stood beside Mara, his clothes soaked and his hands black with soot. Mara looked down at him with pride and relief. She spoke slowly, using words he had begun to understand. "Rin saved tribe. Rin friend." He smiled, his heart full. "We all saved the tribe," he said softly. The next day was quiet. The storm had passed, leaving the valley fresh and green. The sky was clear again and the air was cool. The tribe worked together to repair what had been damaged. Rin helped fix the windmill blades that had bent in the wind, while the giants rebuilt their fences. That evening, Myra called the tribe together. She stood on the stone platform, the firelight dancing across her bronze skin. The entire village gathered around her, their voices silent, waiting for her to speak. Rin stood beside Loma at the edge of the crowd, unsure of what was happening. Myra raised her arms and began to speak in the language of the giants. Her words carried far into the night. Rin caught pieces of it, words like courage, friend, starman, and together. When she finished, she turned to Rin and gestured for him to step forward. The crowd parted, creating a wide path for him. His steps were small against the giant stone ground, but his heart felt strong. Myra knelt down and placed a carved pendant on the ground before him. It was made of polished wood, shaped like a circle with a star at its center. She spoke softly, saying his name and the word Vayari. Rin realized what she meant. They were naming him as one of them. The crowd began to cheer. Loma clapped her hands, her eyes bright with joy. Rin picked up the pendant, holding it carefully. He bowed deeply to Myra and the tribe. That night, the celebration was even greater than before. The giants sang songs of victory, and the sound of drums filled the air. The rain from the storm had turned into a soft mist that glowed under the moonlight. The valley felt alive again. Rin sat near the fire, wearing the pendant around his neck. Loma brought him food and laughed as he tried to lift a piece of fruit larger than his head. The warmth of the fire reflected in her eyes, and Rin felt a deep sense of peace. Later, Myra joined them. She looked at Rin with a thoughtful expression. "Starman brave," she said slowly, pointing toward the repaired windmill, then toward the burned hill. "Fire gone. Water strong," Rin nodded. "Yes, together strong." She smiled at his answer and nodded in approval. In the following days, the tribe continued to recover. The burned trees were cleared and new ones were planted. Rin helped design small lightning rods using metal from his pod. They placed them on the highest hills to protect the village from future strikes. The giants marveled at his ideas and called him Maker of Skyfire, a name that made him laugh. But while peace had returned, Rin noticed something strange. The storm had uncovered large pieces of rock near the mountain base. They looked unnatural, smooth, and covered in strange patterns. One afternoon, he went to study them closely. His scanner buzzed with energy as it read the surface. The readings were unlike anything he had seen. The rock contained traces of metal and power sources older than any human technology. It was as if something ancient slept beneath the mountain. Myra joined him, watching silently. Rin showed her the scanner and pointed to the glowing lights on its screen. He tried to explain with gestures, showing that something big and unknown was buried there. Myra's eyes grew serious. She nodded slowly and said a single word that Rin did not yet understand but felt heavy with meaning. That night, Rin could not sleep. He sat outside his small shelter, watching the stars. The valley was quiet, but the thought of the hidden structure beneath the mountain filled his mind. Was it a natural formation, or was it a sign of something more? He looked at his pendant and the lights of the village below. The tribe had become his home. He would protect them no matter what mysteries the world held. The next morning, he shared his discovery with the tribe. Myra gathered the elders to discuss it. Some believed it was a sacred place of their ancestors, while others feared it was a danger that should remain untouched. Rin listened carefully, his mind racing with ideas. He decided to build a small device to scan deeper underground. With the tribe's help, he collected crystals from the river caves that could store energy. It took several days, but he finally created a small tool that glowed faintly with blue light. When he used it near the mountain, the device showed a faint outline beneath the earth, a massive structure shaped like a dome. Myra and the elders watched in awe. Rin knew they would have to uncover it carefully. Whatever was hidden there might hold the answers to the planet's history, and perhaps even a way to contact his own people. As the sun set behind the peaks, the wind carried the scent of new rain. The valley glowed with quiet strength. The tribe worked together, stronger and wiser than before. Rin looked up at the sky and felt a deep connection between the stars above and the hearts below. He was no longer just a lost explorer. He was a part of this world now. The storm had tested them, but it had also united them. In the silence after the rain, the valley seemed to whisper one truth: that courage and kindness could build bridges between worlds.